revenge for you not supporting us there. We're going to close this facility. We're not even going to tell you about it until it's been done. That is the approach that this government has taken to rural Nova Scotia. Rather than tell the community, we are looking at the closure of your facility in the upcoming months. Let's sit together, let's talk, interested groups, municipality, employees, what can we do with this facility to protect it, protect its jobs, and protect its future prior to our decision to close it. That would have been the reasonable approach. That would have been the approach Nova Scotians thought they would get from this government. Not for the government to say, the facility's closed, not even tell the local member, and then a few weeks later, down comes the cavalry from Halifax, 3 or 4 ministers coming down to Shelburne to solve all their problems. The facility being closed at the time. That is what this government has done. Mr. Speaker, until this government comes to realization that they will not be able to either solve or to work with community economic development groups in this province, from the bunker here in Halifax, we will continue to be losing opportunities in this province. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you as the member from Richmond, community economic development is the way to go for rural Nova Scotia. We need to empower the communities themselves to determine what is the best means of developing their economy, what is going to work for them, and what will not. To ask civil servants to be able to determine that from sitting here in Halifax is unacceptable. One of the unfortunate things, Mr. Speaker, and I've spoken about the successes we've had in my own riding of Richmond County numerous times. Development Île-Madame has been recognized internationally for the success that it has achieved, especially following the collapse of the groundfish fishery on Île-Madame. They have worked together under the TAGS program, then after the TAGS program with the municipal government, the provincial government, the federal government. But Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, for all of the successes they've achieved, for all of the successes they wish to achieve, more recently in the last number of years, had it not been for the municipality and for the federal government, these successes would have not happened. Because unfortunately, rather than the provincial government being a partner, sitting at the table, working with them, encouraging them, learning from them for other communities, they were absent. Not only absent financially, in many cases, I hate to say, Mr. Speaker, the province of Nova Scotia became a hindrance to progress, because it came to the point where they had to say to the provincial representatives, stay away, because you have no money to bring to the table, you have nothing but criticism to bring to the table, and nothing but trying to block projects to bring to the table. That is the reality that we have faced, and I've dealt with it directly myself, Mr. Speaker, and that's unfortunate, because the success achieved in Richmond County should be the success that is copied and achieved in rural communities throughout Nova Scotia. And that's where the province should be, sitting and learning from these community economic development groups, not telling them what to do, not being critical, but saying, let's work with you and let's learn so we can go to Shelburne, we can go to Yarmouth, we can go to Pictou West, we can go down in other areas of Cape Breton, and let's share with the success you've had and see what's going to work for those communities. But to be able to put in the resources and even the funding to these community economic development groups. That has not taken place, and that has been a lost opportunity. Mr. Speaker, we now have more provincial employees in the Department of Tourism than we have in the Department of Economic Development. Allow me to correct myself. We no longer have a Department of Economic Development. We now have an Office of Economic Development. And yet we wonder why rural Nova Scotia is struggling. Nova Scotia Business Incorporated was created to help large industries. It is not there to help development Île-Madame. It is not there to help the ma and pa shop that wants to expand and add 2 employees. It is not there to help the small manufacturer who wishes to maybe add 5 new employees. It is not there for rural Nova Scotia other than for large corporations. You just need to look at the annual reports of NSBI, which clearly show they've been there for Clearwater, for Sobeys, for other large projects, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's not who's employing rural Nova Scotia. Every year that we have Small Business Week, we learn 90% of businesses in Nova Scotia are small businesses. with less than, I believe it's under 20 or 15 employees. Where is their voice in government today? They don't have one. The credit union loan that was created, $150,000, doesn't apply to refinancing. One of the major issues facing small businesses in Nova Scotia, their ability to consolidate their debts and to have one payment rather than 4 or 5. It does not qualify under these rules. The small businesses that have come to me inquiring about this program, thinking that it may help them to be able to get control of their expenses, get control of their debt, and get a better interest rate as a result, we're told flatly, you do not qualify. That is extremely unfortunate, Mr. Speaker. That is a lost opportunity that would have been there under that program. Mr. Speaker, let me talk even more about some of the smaller things that we do for rural Nova Scotia, especially when I look at the situation with our young people. This government has continually cut back the provincial employment program. They have cut back the Youth Conservation Corps program in half. No wonder our young people don't stay in our communities anymore. They can't even find a summer job. And you can't expect that in rural parts that they're going to be able to find employment with fast food restaurants. They don't exist. We don't have those in rural Nova Scotia for the most part. They rely on both the federal government, provincial government to keep our youth there, give them an interest in rural Nova Scotia and allow that to work. Let me give you another example, Mr. Speaker. One of the success stories we've had in Richmond County has been small option homes through the Department of Community Services, where they now provide housing and care for people with special needs. It has been a tremendous success. We now have 3 in Richmond County, and they provide significant employment. We had one incident that happened in Halifax a number of years ago. There's been a freeze on ever since. Another opportunity for economic development stopped by this government. Housing grants, which allow seniors to stay in their homes and allow others to stay in their homes, still no investments made in that in the budget today. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, we must keep rural Nova Scotia growing. This government has a role to play. It's not rocket science, but it's time that we do it now before irreparable harm is done to rural Nova Scotia once and for all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Energy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to rise in the House today to speak to this debate and to reflect an alternate perspective and opinion to that of my honourable colleague for Richmond. And sometimes what people forget in their recounting and reflection of history is telling a little bit of their own history in the process. And we can sit back and we can talk about what they deem to be, unsuccessful ventures or setbacks that have been there. The reality is, the member talked about the wallboard facility in the Strait area. Well, that wallboard facility and the business case is continuing to advance. This government never walked away from that unfortunate situation. This government has continued to work with business and people in the region to develop that and to bring it forward. But you know, Mr. Speaker, I stood in this House when I was Minister of Economic Development, and there was a lull over the Liberal caucus bench and a very quiet hue when the NDP were getting up and criticizing Orenda, because I knew and felt that they made an investment at the time to help stabilize that area and do something, to the point that they invested millions upon millions of dollars not to be seen again. And I could chastise them for irresponsible investment, or I could recognize that we were committed to trying to see that process through and achieve newness. So I can talk about failed initiatives. We can go to members' riding in Richmond County and talk about Scotia Rainbow. He hasn't talked about that investment by the Liberal government.
Guess he wouldn't.
He hasn't talked about that. He hasn't talked in this House, Mr. Speaker, about our commitment to the Strait area in Richmond County, the commitment that this government has made most recently with Stora Enso, and seeing the future success and the expansion of that area. Small business, Mr. Speaker, benefits because of Stora Enso. The $15 million this government is committed to it is helping small businesses that are the contractors, that are the backbone of the economy, that benefit from programs such as our credit union program, a program the Liberals never had the insight, foresight, or ability to introduce. And to the point now he talks about the province trying to catch up to the federal government. Well, the federal government's trying to catch up to our initiative and repeat it in their own institutions. Well, I'm glad to see that the federal government does have the wisdom to pick up on a great provincial idea and pick up on the leadership that we're offering to see that small business need better supports and better efforts that were left negligent in the area. And to recognize that this government has been doing all this to grow the economy, and on Cape Breton Island alone, to have more people employed now than when the Liberals were there. To see that 4,500 more Cape Bretoners are working today, Mr. Speaker, than 10 years ago. 2,100, Mr. Speaker, more workers working today than 5 years ago, when the member from Cape Breton South who was suggesting that wasn't so. Well, there's 2,100 more workers working today under this government than there were under the Liberal government. And that is the facts, Mr. Speaker. And we stand behind those facts, but more importantly, we're standing behind small business. We're standing behind the people that are the backbone of our economy. That's why this government worked continuously, whether it's the credit union system, whether it's the Nova Scotia Chamber of Commerce, whether it's the individual operators that are committed to a vision of this province that the Liberals have lost vision and focus for, and an inability. And they constantly want to say that it's their federal partners that are initiating everything. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased recently to see Cape Breton castings being announced for 100 quality advanced manufacturing jobs in Northside Industrial Park, and I'm very pleased the province of Nova Scotia led that initiative. And I will compliment the federal government to work with us and with industry to realize those opportunities, which anchor and will help us cluster more opportunities in advanced manufacturing, because we're going in with open minds and open doors to opportunities, doors that the previous Liberals shut on people of Cape Breton. The Liberal government, Mr. Speaker, that was unable, Mr. Speaker, to focus on what was necessary for the people rather than just the photo ops of the day that they were running around. Because I would say, Mr. Speaker, of all the announcements that the Liberals would have made under quote-unquote economic development in their tenure, how many of those jobs exist today? How many of those real jobs can they account for today? Versus the ones we've tried and have proven that this government has been able to work and to build and to grow, and to see millions upon millions of dollars invested throughout this province, to see stability in regions, to recognize we do have challenges, to recognize that we do have depopulation issues in rural areas, and we're committed to working with it. That's why this government is committed to multi-year funding for our regional development authorities, why we're committed to working with community development organizations and groups, that we have the framework for a community economic development policy, that we've listened and understand that people want downtown development initiatives to revitalize and enhance their communities and their sense of well-being so they can grow and provide a climate that is for growth and opportunity. And Mr. Speaker, fundamental to all this is the spirit of communities that don't want to let go, that don't want decline, that want to stabilize and build for a better future. It's Nova Scotians, individuals, communities, service organizations. They're the people with the ideas, they're the people with the drive, and they're the ones we're working with, and not like the Liberal Party that seems to think that only Ottawa has their solutions, and they can piggyback on Ottawa all they want, Mr. Speaker. Because, Mr. Speaker, Ottawa's solution thing, it's almost to the point where it's a sad day in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, and in Canada for that fact, because it's now to the point where the Royal Canadian Mint is going to have to take the blue nose off of the dime and put it on the penny, because the federal Liberals gave the other 9 cents away, and we're trying to figure, but it wasn't given for community economic development. It wasn't given for a rural development strategy. It was given for things that if you're a friend of the federal Liberals, then obviously you deserve those 9 extra cents, but by gosh, don't invest in small business. Don't invest in the individual spirit. Open and transparent government, Mr. Speaker, is leading the day. Open and transparent government, Mr. Speaker, is what the people of Nova Scotia know they can rely upon. The type of open and transparent government, Mr. Speaker, that has seen 3 successive balanced budgets in this province with open, accountable financial structures around that to stabilize us and ensure that what we commit to, we can afford to deliver on. The Liberals couldn't do that, and Mr. Speaker, that's why the Liberals are in 3rd place in this House right now. They're in 3rd place in this House because they lost focus on what the priorities of Nova Scotians were. We have difficulties in managing the resources we have because we have to make the choices necessary to lead this province and to stabilize us to the future, Mr. Speaker. And like everything else, the heart of a community is about recognizing what what is necessary to overcome. And today, Mr. Speaker, we heard very, very unfortunate news with regards to Selectron and Glace Bay. And unlike the NDP, we will work with our federal colleagues to deal and get a positive resolve to the jobs that are going to help stabilize that community, that small town in Nova Scotia, the small town that's shown it has the desire, the willingness, and the ability to grow and expand. And we're not going to let a setback be a moment to take back what the NDP want to take from the people of that, and that is the heart and soul of good individuals that are committed to moving forward. Yes, John Morgan, the member from Glace Bay, seems to have a commentary on the mayor from the CVRM. Well, you know, I don't know, but according to the New Democratic Party, Mr. Speaker, who, at least I will say, who should be condemned for the type of release they put out on Selectron, because they don't have any ability or capacity, because the release issued by the member from Cape Breton Centre was despicable. I don't think their release, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy to table it in the House here, had anything to do about the concern about Selectron as much as it had to do with the concern of the NDP party to position their polling for a mayor of the CBRM to run for them in a federal election, because it has nothing to do with a desire to help those people. But I know one thing, the Liberals weren't commissioning a poll with the mayor's name in question. I know the Conservatives, I can say, weren't doing the same. Nope. But the NDP seemed to be awful cozy about this matter, and the NDP seemed to be content on driving doom and gloom and fear factor. Well, it isn't working. The ruse is over. We're going to commit to working with individuals as we have, Mr. Speaker, to stabilize and grow our rural economies, the individuals that are the backbone of Nova Scotia. And they can count on this progressive Conservative government to continue our efforts, regardless of the rhetoric from the opposition benches, and we will work with our federal colleagues in the future and community in partnership. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I believe it's safe to say it was not a dull dissertation. I recognize the honourable member for Pictou East West. I always do that to you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And they've often said that the late debate is the most entertaining part of the whole House, and I think there's probably some merit in that. And it's interesting to hear what previous speakers have been saying. But I do want to thank the member for Richmond for bringing forward this resolution. I think it's very timely, and it's important that we do speak about the problems that are occurring in rural Nova Scotia, not only in Richmond County, but throughout Cape Breton Island and all of mainland rural Nova Scotia. I too come from the mainland rural part of this province in Pictou County, and it seems appropriate that this resolution be on the order paper at this time. And it reads, Mr. Speaker, therefore be resolved, the Tory government has failed to respond to the significant issues facing rural Nova Scotia. And it was interesting, just yesterday we were talking about declining populations in the province, and I think 13 out of the 18 provinces have seen a decline in their numbers, and many of those are young people that are leaving Pictou County and Richmond County and all the other counties throughout this province. Some of them are heading to HRM, some of them are heading to other provinces and other territories in this country. But I guess I want to spend a little bit of my time, Mr. Speaker, on the infrastructure deficit that is occurring in this province, and how rural Nova Scotia perhaps is suffering more under that policy from this government than other areas of this province. It's been well known that in our Department of Transportation and Public Works, there is an infrastructure deficit. In other words, there's not enough money going into the department to meet the needs that are in the highways and bridges and of this province. And that amount is estimated to be $3.4 billion that we're, over the next 10 years, that should be spent just to bring our highways and bridges up to the level to maintain them at the, at a decent, adequate level. And broken over 10 years, that's about $345 million per year, while our budget is far, far short of that. So even though there's a very slight increase this year projected in this year's budget, we're still not meeting the needs of our transportation infrastructure in this province. And really that's about economic development, because if you have good roads, you have good bridges, then people are going to invest in that area of the province. Businesses are going to be able to set up, and they know they're going to be able to get trucks or vehicles to their business in a safe and timely fashion. And it's really a way that, that economic development could occur. And I wanted to speak a minute about some of the roads that maybe are in need of this infrastructure investment in my riding of Pictou West. And there are certainly lots of them, as I know there are around all of Nova Scotia. Earlier in the day, we heard at the Economic Development Committee about the very poor road in Richmond County. It was Highway number 4. And Route 4 there has been neglected for far, far too long. And it just so happens that Route 4 also runs through my riding in Pictou County. It actually runs, I think, all the way from Halifax to Sydney. And the trunk number 4 highway through Salt Springs and Mount Tom area of Pictou West has been neglected probably for 40 years or more, since it was paved, I think, around 1959 or 1960. And since that time, it's really gone to pieces. It's in atrocious or condition, or even deplorable, I would call it. So that road is part of what the Alma Mount Tom Strategic Planning Group has identified as a very important road. It's sort of an alternate road to the Trans-Canada Highway if it should be closed for some reason. And it's also used by a lot of local residents that live in the Mount Tom area. It's handy for them to drive out to exit 19 at Salt Springs or exit 18 at Kemptown, perhaps on their way to Truro. But it needs repair. It's one of the worst roads I've seen anywhere. But just to mention a few of the other roads out there that are also in very, very poor condition. The Granton Road, which runs by the Michelin plant in my riding. The road between West Branch and River John. It was partly paved last year up as far as the McKay Road, but it needs a whole lot more work on the remainder towards the West Branch end. The Scotch Hill Road, which is the home of the former member from Pictou West riding, Donald McGuinness. It also is in very, very poor shape. White Hill Road is one of the worst probably of the whole bunch that needs this infrastructure investment. Green Hill Road, Scottsburn Road, Sunrise Trail, the Montreal Road, I could go on. The Union Centre Road, there's many, many others. And that's only in one riding. There's 52 ridings in the province, most of which have roads and bridges that need an investment. And we're a long ways under looking after the needs of these roads. So is this government looking after or responding to the significant issues they're facing the rural Nova Scotians? Not in transportation, for sure. And just as an example, I want to mention an article that was in our local paper. It's entitled "Highway Conditions Said to be Scaring Off Tourists." And certainly all areas of this province are trying to bring tourists into their area and encourage economic development in that regard. And we have, very fortunately in our area near Scottsburn, Pictou County, Stoneham Chalets. And it's been built up as a farm industry and enterprise. And it's a number of chalets and a convention center and restaurant. And it has worked hard to try to bring in tourists on a year-round basis. And but just lately, the owner of that business, Jeff Gunn, has indicated that there's real problems. He's hearing from his customers that are very concerned about the roads that are leading to that business. And he has called the roads atrocious. He's saying that we might be better off with dirt roads if the pavements are not going to be looked after. He's had frequent complaints from a number of his customers and also from other tourist operators. And he's trying to extend his business to a year-round, 12 months of the year, and this is a real problem for him and for other tourist operators throughout the province when their customers are are not able to come or don't wish to come back because of the very poor infrastructures out there. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to table that if I could, and have it on record as the concerns of one tourist operator in this province who's very unhappy with the condition of our roads, and rightly so, because we're just not investing like we should be. I'll take a minute, Mr. Speaker, to talk about today's announcement that there will be help for seniors. That's good to see that finally the bankruptcy of our seniors is going to stop, and I think in rural Nova Scotia that's a very big issue. And over the past 12 months, actually, there was something like $82 million that was taken from our seniors in this province that they have to pay for their own Medicare in a nursing home or a long-term care facility. And that's going to stop as of next January. That still leaves almost 8-9 months that seniors are going to be forced to turn over their life savings and have to pay for their own Medicare that the rest of us enjoy for free. And so there's concern even over the next 9 months that that's still going to impact on rural Nova Scotia and continue to drain money from our rural economies. So I guess my time is wrapping up, Mr. Speaker, but I guess overall I think it's important that we invest in our rural infrastructure, including our bridges and roads and highways, and our government has not been doing that, and it's time that they stepped up to the plate and invested in rural Nova Scotia, and also in our primary industries like forestry and farming and fishing. And we must work to sustain our quality of life in our rural communities, because strong rural families yield strong communities and makes for a stronger Nova Scotia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. And the motion or the time allotted for this late show debate is now expired. Okay.